happened last year in 2022, depending of course on when you're watching this video, is the government introduced a very quick act, and they called it the Leasehold Reform Ground Rent Act. So they had this thing called, I call it leasehold there. Oh, you're coming from that. Reform is what this is about. And they called it the Ground Rent. There you go. Ground Rent Act. Now, don't worry about dates or any of that palaver. That never comes up in any exam, does it? Not nowadays. But what they did quite quickly was it was a knee-jerk reaction against the fury in the press about new homes companies, businesses, developers, big firms, making a lot of money, a gravy train from ground rent. And what they were doing is that they were building flats, which of course in England and Wales there's 5 million leaseholds, and about 70% of those are flats. So they were building flats and granting them leasehold tenure, which is totally normal in England and Wales. The Scots have got a better law. But what they were doing is they were building houses and making those leasehold. I mean, what's that all about? Apparently 30% of those 5 million properties that are leasehold are actually houses. They were designed hundreds of years ago when the mill owners would build a row of houses for the workers and make them leasehold for like 1,000 years with a peppercorn ground rent. Peppercorn, by the way, means like negligible. So anyway, these developers started building pucker houses, making them leasehold, and the poor little cherubs had to pay ground rent on these things, quite a lot too. And it would have like double clauses built in. And they'd sell the ground rent, or they'd sell the freehold. The freeholder, of course, collects the ground rent. They sold the freehold ground rent thing to investment companies who would then use it as an investment trust. You can't make it up, can you? And they made a load of money from it, and the government quickly stamped down on that. What that did is it banned, let's put this in, it banned new homes being built, there you go, and charging ground rent. But it's only new homes, that's the point, only new stuff. Anything done before was unaffected, so retrospectively it made no difference at all to the 5 million dwellings already on a leasehold basis. So that was a good start, and it killed the developers' gravy train of ground rent, which didn't help them actually, I must admit, but there we are. That's another story, isn't it? Now, this year they're taking the next level with leasehold. They realise that leasehold is a very antiquated system. And it is really. In Scotland, for example, they don't have it. They just have absolute ownership, which is even flats, tenement blocks. They don't have leasehold up there, and leasehold is very much an English and Welsh thing around the world. What's that all about? But essentially, we know how it works. What the new Act is going to do, or the new bill that's going through, it's going to reform it and make it easier for people to buy the freehold or extend the lease. So it's called the new Leasehold. Here we go, Leasehold Reform Act, because they can't think of a better name for it. Bit naughty that, isn't it? It's just called the Leasehold Reform Bill. And what it's going to do, it's going to make it easier for people to buy their freehold, extend the lease. So let's just put a little picture up here of an apartment, shall we? Let's just look at an apartment. Now, I was looking at some apartments a couple of years ago for buy-to-let before the mortgage rates rocketed upwards. And there's a lovely little block of flats down near Guildford that I was looking at, near Ash Vale, a nice part of the world. And they've got these little low-rise flats, sort of 2 or 3 in a block, and they've got trees and landscaping and places for cars to park. And if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see my lovely picture of a car now parked up. It's like a big American car, isn't it? I'll put another tree there as well, because we can. Now, there we have a flat apartment block, or whatever you want to call it. Now, these are invariably owned as leasehold. Now, the whole point about the new bill is they're going to enable people to extend the lease, first of all. Now, the extension provision built in is they're going to allow them to extend the lease, there you go, by up to, and it's a hell of a figure, 990 years. Now, most of these leasehold flats tended to have 125, 150-year leases when they were created. Obviously, as time goes by, that lease expires. And as it gets lower and lower and lower, the price of the flat goes down. And eventually, of course, when the lease runs out, it goes back to the freeholder. We know that. So if you can waltz in there and extend it by up to 990 years, you're practically looking at freehold there, aren't you? I mean, 1,000 years is an awful long time. So that's the first thing they're doing. They're also allowing you to do something about the ground rent. So the ground rent, of course, is the payment you make every year, typically, to the freeholder. It's not the maintenance charge. There's two charges going on here, isn't it? You've got, let's put a different colour pen. You've got the maintenance charge. Let's put that up there for you. Now the maintenance charge is the usually monthly that every owner of the flats pays, and that pays for the upkeep of the common areas, such as the landscaping, the painting, fixing the lift, fixing the roof, that sort of thing. And the problem with the maintenance charge is it's usually dominated, if it's a freeholder who owns it, usually dominated by the freeholder, and he or she can get in their best mates to do the landscaping. It's not unheard of. Get the brother-in-law to do the cutting of the grass at double the normal rate. And that's a bit facetious, but it does happen. So what they're doing now is they're looking at the ground rent. Now the ground rent, let's just put that one down here for you. Now the ground rent, remember, is the annual charge that's payable to the freeholder. That goes to the freeholder. Let's put them in there. Now the freeholder can be a person. It can also be an investment company, as we've seen, and they receive this money every year, and they love all that. There's nothing for that. There's no benefit for that. It's just a rent, effectively. It's almost like you're renting. So what the new reform bill is looking to do something about that rent. Now what they're allowing you to do is to pay a fee, some kind of premium value, in order to reduce the ground rent down to a peppercorn, as they call it. Peppercorn is like nothing. That's the whole point about it. So you pay a sum of money, and they're looking at having some kind of arbitration for how much is paid, and that reduces the ground rent to virtually nothing. So that's what they're trying to do. Remember, this act just affected new build. The new one, of course, the one this year, next year, will affect existing. Now, what they're also looking to do, not only to reduce the ground rent down to a peppercorn, but they're also trying to get rid of the marriage value. Now, a lot of people ask me about this thing called the marriage value. So I've got a little article which I dug out from the press just to share that with you. So again, if you're on podcast, you'll not be able to see this, but I'll read it out to you. Here we have an article from a member of Human Rights Challenging. She's a lawyer, and she's looking at what's going on here. And I'll zoom in here. For Shabnam Ali Khan is sort of challenging this on behalf of landlords. And it says there, amongst other changes, the new bill proposes to scrap marriage value. Simply explained, marriage value is the difference in the value of the flat with its current lease and the value once the lease has been extended. So if you extend the lease, of course, and just move on there for you, currently a leaseholder must pay 50% of the marriage value to the landlord where the lease is less than 80 years when the leaseholder serves formal notice to extend. So that's the rule here. So if you were to extend that lease to 900 odd years, you're going to have to pay this thing called the marriage value to the landlord, effectively the freeholder. So they were happy with that. But now the new bill is going to try and get rid of that completely, which makes it really cheap now to extend the lease. Now this is the thing, isn't it? Now because it's cheap to extend the lease, landlords, of course, are missing out. And of course, she's going to the human rights now to challenge it on behalf of all these landlords, because she's been employed by them to try and seek some sort of retribution or something or other when it comes to it. So it's all good for consumers, therefore. This is all looking good, isn't it? So just to finish off some of the other things they can do. So they can extend the lease with a very little charge. There's a premium to pay to get rid of ground rent virtually. And there's this marriage value they're going to try and get rid of as well to make it much better for consumers. Other things they're going to look to do, they're going to look to challenge the costs, get them to challenge the costs for the maintenance charge. So if they don't like the maintenance charge, the owners of the flats could challenge that, and they can cap those fees as well. And they need to be more transparent as to where that money goes. So if every owner of the flat pays £200 a month towards maintenance charges, which is often they do, it has to be more transparent as to where that money goes and what's been spent, that sort of thing. And maybe to cap it and challenge the costs. So I think that's good too. So it's all on behalf of the consumer, of course. These people who live here in these flats are being championed quite considerably. Now, the asset owners are a bit upset about this. So, again, it begs the question, who's going to pay for all of this? Because somebody has to pay for it. The government's not going to chip money in, because that's not how they roll, is it? They'll just do the legislation. So will prices fall? Will leasehold flats fall in value if they have this capability? I don't know, but you'll see in the press, £30 million payment, all this sort of stuff coming through. I think it's a good thing. Personally, I think we should just convert over to the Scots system. In Scotland, north of the border, they don't have leasehold. All of their flats are owned as absolute ownership. In other words, they own it forever. Now, my daughter Jess and Andy, they live in a flat in Edinburgh, and they have absolute ownership. So there's no lease. They have a maintenance arrangement. They have to join a company which maintains the property, and they have to pay money for that. So there's issues around that. Of course there are. You know, the hallways and the lifts, that sort of thing. They get all of that. But they don't have any problem with ground rent or lease. I mean, it seems quite easy. We tried to do it with common hold, but that died a death, didn't it? So I think this is something to look out for. If you're doing your exams, you might get stuff on the leasehold reform from 2022. That'll be in the text, but this one won't be in there yet. But you need to know about these things. Of course you do. You need to understand what's going on. And I'll keep you informed. Hope that's been useful.